welcome to Slator Pod on this Friday the 13th, and what a week it has been. Hi, Esther.
Hi, Florian.
All right, so it's been a very busy week, a very tough week for everybody, for the entire industry, for obviously the economy at large, for literally everybody almost in Europe and the United States, as the coronavirus continues to spread and travel bans are announced and everything. So we had to make a very tough decision this week as well. We had to actually postpone SlatorCon London. It was originally scheduled for early May, but now we managed to find a solution with the hotel to move it to early September. And of course, like everybody else, we're hoping that by that time things will have calmed down and travel restrictions will have been lifted. I was actually very touched by the very understanding comments and encouraging comments I got from the speakers, the panelists, and the sponsors, of course, and the participants. So everybody understands the decision and has been very supportive and kind. So really like to take this opportunity also to thank them. How are things in London, Esther, at the moment?
Yeah, a bit mixed. I think we're stepping up on the social distancing thing. It seems like more workplaces are encouraging people to work from home. Some are kind of closing because maybe someone there has been tested positive. So I think obviously the government is still issuing different advice and stepping up the level of risk from low to moderate and things like that. I guess it's quite similar elsewhere across Europe as well. I mean, we haven't taken the same kind of measures that you're seeing in Italy or anything like that, but I think they have said potentially closures of schools might follow, and that hasn't happened here yet, but I know you were saying in Switzerland.
Yeah, it's coming.
School closures.
I think they're going to announce it today, so yeah, I will have to work from home next week. Make sure that maybe my kids are going to be running in the background when we're taping this the next time around. So
it can be special guests.
Special guests, indeed.
Yeah.
So what we did, and this is going to be a slightly shorter podcast because it's been, as I said, a very difficult and busy week. So we're just going to review a feature article, a news article we published a few hours ago around the coronavirus and the impact it's having on the language industry and all the different stakeholders. Thanks a lot to all the people that contributed their input to it. So we've really seen a major, everybody's being disrupted to one degree or another in Europe and the United States. And there's if you could categorize in two broad buckets, it's really the interpreters and anybody that's relying on on-site that's really being disrupted. We spoke to Alexander Gansmeyer, one of the co-hosts of the Troublesome Terps podcast and a professional conference interpreter. And he's saying it used to be the busy season in March, and now everything's been canceled. And so he's doing a few board meetings here and there, but it's been a tough situation for the past couple of weeks.
He's based where? In Germany?
He's in Germany, yeah. I think he's based in Munich, and they've already stepped up measures there as well. So, generally when you're looking at the interpreting space, anything that's related to conferences obviously is really hard hit. And interesting, Alexander told us that a lot of the organizers are trying to use the force majeure clause to avoid paying any cancellation fees, and so there's a tough negotiation part in this with the conference interpreters and interpreters generally. So a lot of the federations like the BDU, the FIT, the ATA, they're stepping up the advocacy for these groups that are hard hit. And really commend them on that. Then, of course, on the remote side, we also spoke to Boost Lingo, who they have an app, so they're in the hospital sector, in the healthcare sector as well, particularly in the U.S. And they're saying that they're seeing a move away from on-site interpreting to really to the app-based virtual VRI, and anybody who's already set up for VRI is getting very busy at the moment.
Makes sense, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah. And then we also spoke to a couple LSPs. We spoke to Suma Lingua, the Polish LSP. So they've gone full remote for the staff. Everybody, is working from home. So in this industry, generally, when you're looking from the translation side, as we discussed last time, it's already quite well set up for going remote. So they've everybody's working from home at the moment. On the client side, he said there's actually kind of a spike in demand for like coronavirus policies and communication.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not a sustainable boost, but I've heard that from a few other people as well, that this week was very busy with like translating these types of policies and guidelines. Chris from Suma, the CEO, he also, on the negative side, he said that a lot of product releases on the IT side were put on hold. Localization's on hold, some multimedia, some e-learning, he's saying, has really slowed down. So it's going to be interesting to see which parts from the clients are going to hold up. And it was very tough for us to ascertain that. Even in media, we didn't really get a clear picture. You would think, okay, Netflix and everybody stays at home and watches, but there's disruption there as well. The CEO of SDI Media told us that they're disinfecting the studios, but and making sure it's safe for work. But if there's other travel restrictions, if people can't come into the studios, then there's an operational hiccup there. Interestingly, he said they actually had some dubbing done in Hong Kong, where people had to dub using face masks. And he said the quality was not impacted too badly, so that was interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say, on the kind of dubbing media side, I mean, it actually looks like Keyword Studios was doing reasonably well, and obviously they're gaming focused. So I know we did a chart there of some of the listed LSPs and how they're performing compared to the benchmark, and Keywords is actually one of the ones which was performing better than the benchmark since this has all hit.
So I have maybe another take on this. Because I was looking at that, we looked at about 8 or 9 companies that are listed. It's kind of as good a proxy as anything, but what I think, this is not vertical driven. It's not driven necessarily by the verticals these companies serve, but in a crash like we've had this week, a stock market crash, it might actually come down to strength of your balance sheet.
Right.
If you're looking at the players that actually outperformed the benchmark, this is RWS, Appen, Keyword Studios, and SDL. Those are companies with overall probably fairly strong balance sheets, and then on the you had Honyaku, Straker, Zoo and Rosetta. I mean, I'm not intimately familiar with their balance sheet, but basically the large players seem to be doing better than the smaller ones, because right now is the time when you want to have a strong balance sheet and sit on some cash. And so maybe it's more to do with that. But what's encouraging is that the large LSPs outperformed the benchmark. Outperform meaning they didn't fall as much as the large ones, right? So it's not outperforming in terms of gaining, but there hasn't been any crash in shares of SDL or RWS compared to the 25% down that we've had over the past couple of weeks for the benchmark. So again, it comes down to strength and balance sheet, I think. I've been really struggling to find to make sense of right now of which verticals are going to get hit the most by this, and then how this is going to ripple across the industry. I think we're going to have a lot clearer picture in the next 4 to 6 weeks on that, and obviously we'll be following up on that with our coverage. So again, I encourage everybody to go to the website and look at that piece and read it. It's really interesting. Lots of voices in there. So let's not do an entire Corona podcast. We actually had a very interesting story, because it will pass. This shall pass, and then things will go back to normal, and then we, the problems and drivers of this industry will likely remain the same. So we had a very, very interesting buyer feature with Fisher Investments, something that you or I are probably very familiar with, because we both come from the financial translation side. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was so a buyer feature with wealth and asset management firm Fisher Investments. So their localization manager, who's based in London, Celia Plowright, she told us a bit about their localization operations. They localize into 13 languages at the moment, so predominantly or the European languages, plus also Korean, simplified and traditional Chinese, as well as Japanese. And mainly what they're translating, localizing, is documentation for client events, also videos and internal communications, some educational materials for customers as well. And so the localization team at Fisher sits under corporate services. It's part of, I think, the content and communications team, which is under corporate services, but obviously collaborates across function with marketing, etc., as you would expect. They have a 7-person team in-house, so relatively small, but they also they have translators as part of that 7-person team. 5 internal translators, 1 project manager, and 1 marketing manager. And it seems like this was a concerted effort really to start to in-source quite a lot more of the localization and language work than had been happening previously. So since about mid-2018, they ramped up the team operations, and they actually shifted from being about 70% outsourced on the language tasks to now being more, I think, along the lines of 30 to 45% outsourced. It's quite a big shift in operating model. And they do that with a TMS, and then for the rest of the work they are also outsourcing to some multilingual vendors, some LSPs, and some freelancers. So an interesting sort of setup and an interesting sort of transformation, I suppose, of their localization operations inside at Fisher.
Yeah, I was struck by how professional and well thought out this was, right? Because a lot of my clients were from the financial space, but of course that was 5-10 years ago. But it was a lot more like, okay, here's my inbox, I'll send you the file. Right. And they seem to, they have a really kind of mature process set up at Fisher. So I was really impressed by that, and this is also a testament to how far a lot of buyers have come over the past 5 years in this journey towards maturity.
Yeah, it was interesting as well, and they were talking about having tested sort of slightly different ideas. So, for example, I think at one point they were playing around with the idea of having translators actually doing some project management tasks as well, to see how that worked out. But actually, it wasn't scalable when volume started to increase. It wasn't particularly scalable as a model, so they've changed that around to having 1 dedicated PM for the team. And they say it kind of falls into line with a wider company philosophy, which is one of labor specialization, so actually focusing on the task that you're supposed to be doing, your expertise.
Great. Again, encourage everybody to go and check this out. And then we had a few other stories this week. There's just one I want to touch on before wrapping up. Today was another monster contract for police interpreting in the UK, and looks like they've learned from the past, because one interesting, what I mean by learning from the past is, we all remember we spoke about a couple of times the problems they had with these giant interpreting contracts in the UK before, and now that Leicestershire Police, they introduced something called dynamic purchasing system. So they have this giant framework contract, but apparently you can apply to join it throughout. So it's not like an initial vetting stage and then you either are on it or you're not, but basically...
And then you have to wait 4 years before getting another shot or something.
Exactly, no, so you can basically always apply to be on it. So, it's an interesting new approach I really haven't seen yet, but not that I'm looking at all of the language industry contracts, but it seems like something that we'll watch out for. Again, the numbers are so large. I mean, this is 100 million pounds. Granted, it's an 8-year contract, but those are big contracts. So
over 8 years,
over 8 years, probably the big word's going to snap up some of that. And we did cover their results this week as well. I think they had a good year in terms of revenue growth, fairly flat on the profitability. But so that's that. So as I said, it's going to be slightly shorter podcast. We'll be back with the usual half an hour next week. So thanks a lot for dialing in and checking in, listening to this. And thanks to Esther.
Thanks.
Stay
See you
safe.
next week.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.